Hello, today I'll be creating a rainbow vortex of cubes using something I haven't used before, so I hope it's going to be interesting, and let's get started. We're going to start with a number of rows. So number of rows, okay, me and typing, we don't get along. A number of columns, and then we're going to have a total number, and this is going to be the product between the two of them. Now we're going to have a 3D assembly. We're going to loop and create cubes, and for every cube we're going to have a number of faces, which is 6, and then again we're going to loop, and here we're going to have cube face. Okay, this is it for the structure. Now let's move on to the CSS. We're going to have an edge length, let's say something like 1.5 ms. Now let's put something on the screen. Cube face, we're going to give it this edge length as width and also as height, and let's give it a background black. Now we should be seeing something. Okay, next let's do a box shadow. It's going to be inset, the offsets and the blur are all going to be 0. Then I'm going to have a spread, and also the color is going to be something like deep pink. Now let's set something on the body, and this is going to be overflow hidden. Then we're going to make it full height. Oh, sorry. Nope. Okay, like this. And now we're going to set a perspective, and this is going to be something like 25 ms, which may be a bit exaggerated, but okay. Let's set also a background. Now that we've done this, let's set some generic div styles. Position absolute, transform style, preserve 3D. Okay, this is it for the generic divs, nothing more. Now for the assembly, let's put everything in the middle. So we're going to have top 50%, and then let's, oops, sorry. Left 50% as well. Now let's set a margin here, and this one is going to be minus half the edge length. Okay, now let's set some cube positioning. So we're going to start with something like transform, and here I'm going to have translate 3D. I'm going to have X, Y, and then the third coordinate. And in starting with this, I'm going to compute my X, and this is going to be a calc value. And now let's get started with setting the number of rows, which is going to be 8, the number of columns also 8, and we're going to compute a couple of constant values. This one is going to be half the number of rows minus 1. I'm going to have a similar constant for the number of columns, so this is for the columns. Okay, now here I'm going to have an I minus, then this is for the columns, times the edge length. Oops. I'm going to have the same value for the Y, except this is going to be J, and this is going to depend on the one relative to the columns. And as for the Z value, I'm going to have calc, and here I'm going to have, this is horizontal, so for the columns, times the edge length. Just leave it like that for now. Now I'm going to set I and J, I'm going to set them both to 0. Actually, just set them on the div element as well. Just set them here on the div, because it's more convenient this way. Now I'm going to have loop. So for I from 1 to the number of columns, nth child, and here I'm going to use number of columns times n plus I plus 1, and here I'm going to set I to the loop index. Okay, now I'm going to have something similar for rows. So let's take this out of here, and I'm going to have I multiplied to the number of columns here and setting j equal. Okay, so this does it. One more thing I want here is set a color. It's going to be an HSL value, calc. This depends on I, so I times 360 over the number of columns. Then I'm going to have 65%, 65%. And something I'm going to do here is replace this with current color. So I should have something like a rainbow grid. Now let's actually make these, but first something else I can do is add a rotate Y here. And this is going to be a calc value. Let's say I'm going to have J times 90 degrees over, and this is going to be number of rows. Okay, so this is starting to look like something. Next thing here, let's set a transform, but first let's do backface visibility hidden. Okay, and let's set a transform, and this is going to be a rotate 3D. I'm going to use j for the second component of the vector. The third component is always 0. Then I'm going to have a calc here, an m that is 1 initially times 90 degrees. And after this, I'm going to have a translation, and here I'm going to use half the edge length. Okay. Now for the after the lateral faces, I have the top and the bottom face, and for these I'm going to have nth child, and here actually I'm going to set j as calc 1 minus I. N plus 5, because I have 4 lateral faces, so starting with the 5th one, here I switch I to 1, and this is going to also switch my j. Next thing I'm going to do is have a loop here, so for I from 0 to 6, because I have 6 faces, and I'm going to eliminate the faces for which m is 1, and these are the first lateral face and the second lateral face and the first horizontal face. So these are going to be faces at indices 1 and 4. So if I modulo 3 is different from 1, because 1 modulo 3 is 1 and 4 modulo 3 is 1, then I'm going to have nth child I plus 1, and here I'm going to set the m, and it's going to depend on whether it's a lateral face, so if I is smaller than 4, lateral, and in this case it's the loop index, otherwise it's minus 1. Okay, so now I'm having cubes here, which is good, because that's what I wanted. I'm thinking this is pretty much all, but before I do anything else, I'm going to have here CSS register property, and here I'm going to have name, and this is going to be m, syntax, this should be number, and then I'm going to have initial value, and this is going to be 1. So I'm not going to need to set this here. It's going to work without that. And now I can collapse this. Now that I have that, I can set an animation, but first let's set an animation duration. So 1 second, let's say. So what I'm going to have now is an oscillating animation that switches the value of m to -1. So here I'm going to have keyframes oscillation to m becomes -1. Now let's set this animation. So animation oscillation animation duration is in out infinite alternate. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is use that m and multiply it there, and this should give me an oscillation, and it does. As you can see, I'm getting an oscillation. Okay, that's good, but it could be more exciting than this. For example, I could also have a scaling and transform. So let's do a simplifying function here. So scale 3D, and this is for uniform scaling, so when I have the same factor along all 3 axes. So this is going to be a return scale 3D, and as I said, it's the same factor, same. Okay, and now I'm going to have scale 3D, and I'm going to use a factor, and this one is also going to be registered here, just like this one right here. So this is going to be f, and the initial value is going to be, let's say, something 0.9. Now let's bring it back here. I'm going to have a similar set of keyframes. This is going to be zooming, I don't know. F, this is going to be 0.1. And here I'm going to have animation name. It's going to be oscillation and zoom. Animation duration is going to be something like this. Okay, and then I'm also going to compute an animation delay. This is going to be a calc value, and here I'm going to use both I and j, so I'm going to sum them up and then multiply all of this with -2 times t, because it's alternating, so I'm going back over the number of rows over the number of columns. Actually, I'm going to want to add them up instead. So let's see about that. Okay, now one final tweak I want to add here is another set of keyframes. Keyframes rotation around the y-axis to transform. So what I'm going to do here is have rotate y 1 turn, and then here I'm going to have animation, let's say a random duration, linear, infinite, and that's pretty much it. So something else I can do here to make stuff look better is increase these numbers. So let's make this 13, and here as well make it 13, and we should be getting something a bit more interesting. And of course you can increase that number even further if you have a good enough system, but I'm just going to leave it like this. This is it for today. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have and you want me to be able to do more in the future, please remember this is up to you. Consider supporting my work in one of the ways explained in the description, with a donation, by getting something off my Amazon wishlist, or at least by sharing this to show the world what can be done with CSS these days, because I think it's pretty damn cool. In any event, thanks for watching.